Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here, and I kind of got a special video for you all today. I'm going to be handing it over to my friend Tim, who's going to be talking about, I think, 6 or so books to get you started in the Arthurian legend, kind of introducing you to Arthuriana and that sort of thing. So if you like it, you like his content and stuff like that, leave a comment down below, tell me you want more, and I will make him do some more videos. So without further ado, I'll send it over to Tim right now.
Hey, so yeah, I'm going to be going over a couple of books to get started with the Arthurian tradition. This is really the Arthurian canon. It's not a comprehensive review, in as much as there is an Arthurian canon. But just a couple of books to get you started. Often what people have trouble with when they're starting to read Arthurian literature is, where do I begin? Is there an original? Where does some of this stuff come from? Sadly, the fact is that it doesn't really come from any proof positive source that we know of. A lot of it kind of accretes over time. And one thing that people often ask about starting the tradition is, do I need to read the stuff about the historical Arthur? Was Arthur a real guy? Was he not a real guy? There are dozens of those books out there. And the sad fact of it is that you don't really need to, no. We don't really know a whole lot about the historical Arthur, if there ever was such a person. There probably wasn't, unfortunately. Start to disappoint anyone who might have been hoping I would say otherwise. There are a lot of books. It's a little cottage industry. There are things like this you can get into if you like the scholarship particularly, but not really necessary. Where you will want to start is this book. Get a little closer here. Not the nicest copy, sorry, but this is the one I have. Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. This is where we really get the Arthurian legend commencing in its recognizable state. There are a couple of earlier sources we have for Arthur, mostly just mentions. The Galfridian Arthur, that's the Arthur written by Geoffrey of Monmouth, is really where things kick off, though, in terms of Arthur as a popular character in folklore and the popular consciousness. Relative to the time it was written, History of the Kings of Britain was very successful. A lot of people read it, a lot of people enjoyed it, and began to use its stories for themselves. They began to write what you might call Arthurian fan fiction after a certain point. It's not just Arthur, there are a lot of other things in here. You can just read the Arthur section if you want, but the whole book is worth a read. It kind of contextualizes a lot of what you'll understand as British folklore and tradition. Next up, we're going to get to a couple of French authors. So I'll start with Chrétien de Troyes, who's kind of the big guy when it comes to the French tradition in Arthurian literature. After Geoffrey, Chrétien is the guy who introduces Lancelot and the love triangle with Lancelot, Arthur, and Guinevere. He also introduces Percival and gives us the early indications of the Grail. Chrétien probably didn't realize or intend how prominent the Grail was going to become in Arthurian literature. He probably just thought it was a dish that had a little bit of magic associated with it. But he never actually finished that story, leading to a lot of other French authors trying to write their own conclusions, and a robust tradition came out of that, and led to Lancelot Grail and a lot of the other stuff that we get later on that makes the Grail into far more than it originally appears in secondary author we got right here, if I can actually hold the book, is Marie de France's, Longueville in particular. She's got a couple of other kind of peripherally Arthurian stories there. Another amazing early author in the Arthurian tradition that you might want to give a look to, especially if you want to see how this story is starting to develop over time as we leave Geoffrey behind and start getting to the next couple generations. The Arthurian tradition does veer French, especially after Chrétien. That said, we have also Sir Gawain and the Green Knight occurring a little later on. This is an English tradition story. One of the best, in my opinion. Certainly one of the most critically well regarded, I would say. This kind of replaces some of the things we would tend to think of as the British tradition. So, yeah, Gawain reprises his role as the primary knight in the Arthurian court, as opposed to Lancelot, Galahad, or Percival, or Tristan in some cases. And we get much more kind of, well, I don't want to say more Celtic, but we get a significant amount of kind of Celtic vibe in there. Again, great story, excellent to read. This is the Tolkien translation. That's what I had on the shelf when I started preparing for this video. You can really read any translation, especially just getting started. They're all good. Well, most of them are good. Finally, I've got Thomas Malory, who's really the guy if you really just want to get a snapshot of where did the Arthurian legend really kick off as we lead into the modern era, what's influencing modern fantasy. This is Thomas Malory. There are a couple of different versions of Malory. The Villeneuve and the Caxton, or the Winchester manuscript in the original. You don't really need to worry about that too much. Malory was as much a compiler as he was a original storyteller. He invented a few things. Sir Gareth is one of Malory's. But a lot of what he's doing is translating some of the French stuff back into English, and in a lot of cases truncating it, making it a little shorter and more readable. Malory, great writer. On the other hand, he also arrived at a very fortunate time for him in the Arthurian literary tradition, in that Arthur was kind of going through one of his cyclical bouts of unpopularity around the time that Malory was beginning to write. So Malory arrives at the tail end of the medieval tradition. People are starting to get less interested in the Arthurian legend. There's a resurgence later on, but Malory was kind of left holding the bag as the last guy in the English tradition who writes a lot of this stuff down in a easily comprehensible form. So a lot of what we understand today as the Arthurian legend, a lot of what you're going to read in fantasy novels, a lot of what you see in Tennyson, a lot of, say, in the movies, so say Merlin the TV show or John Boorman's Excalibur, is largely coming from Malory. So if you want one book to read, or read in selections, because it is a pretty hefty tome, to get an idea of where the Arthurian tradition started, or started in the medieval tradition and kind of carried on into the modern era, this will be more recognizable than something like Geoffrey of Monmouth. Geoffrey's Arthur is much more a conqueror, much more an emperor. It's much more about how powerful and rich he is. By the time of Malory, he started to take on a much more recognizable form as the kind of the magical king with the magical sword and the wizard advising him. So yeah, I hope that has been helpful to some extent. If you want to hear me say a little bit more about these, then let me know. I'd be happy to do so.
So there you have it. I hope you found these kind of introductory texts to the Arthurian legend helpful. I think Tim did a great job, so leave some words of encouragement down below, and I think I'll be able to kind of, like I said, kind of strong arm him into doing a couple more videos. If you have any video ideas, he's going for a PhD in Arthurian literature. How do you word that, Tim?
Medieval literature.
Okay, he's going for a PhD in medieval literature, but I know he's got like a thing for Arthurian stuff. So if you have any kind of like specific questions or kind of video ideas you want him to cover, I'm sure we could probably try to arrange something. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and whether you're reading Arthuriana or not, always remember, read victoriously.